Okie dokie.
Dear Mario, please come to the castle. I have baked a cake for you. Yours truly, Princess Toadstool. Peach.
What can one say about this game that hasn't already been said? Not a lot, I'd argue, but in a series about 3D platformers, it'd be remiss of me to skip over this one. And hey, perhaps you're one of the lucky 10,000 who have never heard of Super Mario 64, in which case, this video's for you. Super Mario 64 actually began life as a Super FX game. Now I better explain. Back in the days of the NES, game developers would expand the capabilities of the console by including extra circuitry and stuff within the game cartridge. This is how, for example, two-way scrolling was achieved in Super Mario Bros. 3. Later on, during the 16-bit era, these chips became somewhat more sophisticated, and one of the most famous examples was the Super FX chip, engineered in part by the late Ben Cheese, who I'm only mentioning because that is a fabulous name. Anyway, the Super FX chip brought a whole slew of extra functionality to the SNES. You can see it in action if you play Yoshi's Island. All that stretching and warping and stuff is all down to the Super FX chip. But perhaps the more relevant example was Star Fox. By today's standards, it's a little slow and a little Spartan. But back when it was released, this was revolutionary. 3D games with filled polygons on your own home console, backed by an actually pretty good game? Surely this was the next big thing. During the development of Star Fox, game designer Shigeru Miyamoto started thinking about making a 3D Mario game. This coincided with the announcement of their next console, then known as Project Reality. Development commenced in September 1994, snippets of the game were shown throughout 1995, and by the end of May 1996, Super Mario 64 was complete. Around a month later, it hit store shelves in Japan alongside the brand new Nintendo 64, with the United States release following that September. So, with less than 2 years development time, and on an entirely new console, what can one possibly expect? Of course, you probably know the rest. The game was an immediate hit. It had a few teething issues, and maybe it looks a bit dated nowadays, but speak to any retro gaming enthusiast, and chances are they'll tell you that it remains as fresh and playable today as it ever was. Yes, playable. A lot of the time you come across a classic video game, and it tends to be a little clunky. But due to the way Super Mario 64 controls, it's got a fluidity to it that I've yet to see matched in any other 3D platformer. Let's take a look at the controls, specifically the much maligned N64 controller. It's weird, it's got 3 prongs and there are buttons all over the place. There have been stories going around about how the controller was designed around Super Mario 64, and it seems there's some truth to them. Programmer Giles Goddard, the talent behind Mario's big squishy head on the title screen, suggested that the controller and the game sort of informed one another. Either way, you can tell just by playing that this is the ideal controller for the game. Everything you need is easily accessible in one way or another, but the main giveaway is the joystick. Unlike more modern joysticks, this one is quite long and spindly, allowing for a remarkable range of movement. Tilt the joystick just a tiny bit and Mario will creep along slowly. The further you push it, the faster Mario will move. This is the sort of thing that you can't really replicate using digital controls, and in previous Mario games, running fast was achieved by holding down a separate button. Here you can just ram the stick all the way and Mario's off at a full pelt. The way Mario responds to the stick's movement feels natural. Just a quick point to make on this. It's a cartoony platformer, so you're not expecting absolute realism from the physics. But it's important that what's presented is believable and consistent. So, when you change direction on the stick, Mario will either run in a circle to match that direction, or he'll skid and quickly turn, depending on the angle you're going for. This is all fairly standard stuff today, but again, it was brand new in 1996. Joysticks were mostly used for simulation games, Flight Simulator or Elite or Mech Warrior. You used a joystick to control a vehicle. Using it to control a person is a totally different experience, and Super Mario 64 gets it spot on. More so perhaps than its own sequels, but we'll get onto those another time. It's not just about running around. This is another aspect that is, as far as I know, unique to Super Mario 64, the jumping. We know from previous games that Mario's all about verticality. While Mario 64 is a bit less vertical than its 2D predecessors, the plumber is somehow even more athletic in this game. He can jump, easy enough. He can double jump, no, not that sort of double jump, to get a touch more height. He can triple jump, like he's competing at the Olympics. Just by experimenting, the average player can work this out. After all, there's a big old playground for you to run around at the very start of the game. But there are a few more tricks which aren't immediately obvious. Crouching and jumping fires Mario into the air for a backflip, a la Super Mario Bros. 2. Jumping while skidding gives you the somewhat similar somersault jump. Jumping into a wall allows you to wall jump, although the timing can be a bit tricky at first. Jumping and attacking sends Mario flying forwards. Hang on, attacking? Yeah, Mario can punch Goombas in the face now. You have to be stood completely still to make use of this though, so it didn't make it to future 3D Mario games. The ability to tackle, however, and fly about all over the place, is the final piece of Mario's level traversing arsenal. In the right hands, you can spend 90% of your time airborne, and the other 10% sliding around on your belly. Learning the ins and outs of Mario's expansive moveset is part of the reason the game is still played and beloved today. Especially since, as I say, there isn't another game that quite feels like this one. The levels in Super Mario 64 are designed in such a way that you're welcome to reach your goal in whatever way you like, your goal being to collect a Power Star. The game doesn't especially care how you go about doing that, and in some cases you can even collect Power Stars by accident. Let me explain. Each of the 15 levels in the game contains 7 Power Stars. 6 can be found within the level itself, with the 7th appearing once you collect 100 coins. There are also a number of bonus stars hidden within the hub world, more on that later, bringing the total to 120. To finish the game, so to speak, you need 70 stars. Again, more on that later. And for the most part, it doesn't matter which 70 those are. There are certain levels you have to complete in a specific order, for example the 3 boss fights with Bowser. And later levels require a certain amount of stars before you can access them. Other than that, you can do whatever you like. If you can play a level, you're welcome to whatever stars you can get your hands on. On entering a level, you're given a vague description, and from there you've got to work out how that pertains to a star. Sometimes it's straightforward, and will point to a specific landmark or character. On rare occasions, you're flat out told what to do. But as you're running around, you may notice that you can see stars hanging around in all sorts of places, and if you're able to work out how to get to them, you can have them. Some stars, however, are staying right where they are until you unlock the power-up necessary to reach it. You see these transparent colourful blocks dotted around the levels? At certain points throughout the game, you can activate these blocks, and they'll give you one of 3 power-ups. Blue blocks give you the Vanish Cap, allowing Mario to walk through certain walls. Green blocks turn Mario into Metal Mario, making him invincible and allowing him to walk around in water. And red blocks give you the Wing Cap, prominently displayed on the game's cover art. Keeping these locked away at the beginning is necessary, as it gives players a chance to ease into the gameplay before throwing new mechanics at them. It also emphasises the idea of going back to previous levels to tie up any loose ends, and to explore them in new ways. This idea of freeform exploration is what makes Mario 64 feel alive, and gives you a sense of agency in what's going on. You decide how you want to play, and even if you've played before and know how to get all the stars, getting one before you're supposed to still feels rewarding, and ever so slightly naughty. It's also another pioneering aspect to this game. Sure, freeform objectives and open worlds weren't new, and even 3D platformers such as Jumping Flash had large levels which you could traverse as you pleased. But combining the two, well, there's just something special about it. And this idea would be borrowed in many 3D platformers to come. Something else that isn't exactly new, but was done very well in Super Mario 64, was the hub world. Level select menus are fine, and for some types of game, they're the best you can do. But for a game of this style, it only makes sense that your level select menu would instead be a separate level itself, in which you can run around and get used to the platforming in a safe environment. I should mention that later on in the game, it's possible to die by breaking Mario's legs. But by that time, the player should know better. This hub world, as it were, also presents the opportunity to reward exploration. For example, the various secret levels and hidden stars you can find within the castle walls. So we've explored exactly what makes Super Mario 64 the game that it is. Why is it then that this game continues to be a staple in your average retro gamer's diet? Why does it still get so much press and attention? Well, part of that is because it's a Nintendo game, so it's always going to have a core fanbase that will worship and revere its very name. But I believe a greater part of it is that it's still, here's that word again, immensely playable. It's easy to pick up, it's easy to work out what's going on, and the graphics are kinda chunky and kinda fuzzy, but does that matter? Not really. It feels smooth, it feels solid, it reacts how you expect it to, and crucially, it's fun. The level design is varied enough that it never feels old. Once you start to grow tired of a level, either you can nip off to a different one, or you're probably almost done with it anyway. The freedom afforded by this game's design has also made it a favourite for speedrunners, which is perhaps another reason for its lasting popularity. Hey, maybe you'd like to learn about parallel universes, or how you can have half an A press. Remember before when I mentioned that you need 70 stars to finish the game? Well, there are plenty of exceptions to this rule. It's relatively easy to do it with only 50, and it's been done with 15 stars, or sometimes with none at all. For some reason, Super Mario 64 also has a disproportionate share of conspiracy theories surrounding it. Did you know that every copy of Super Mario 64 is personalised? I don't get it either, but it's a thing. I think the real answer is simple. It's a very, very good game. It's aged amazingly well, it's still a unique experience, and it was released at a time when the technology behind it was new and tasty. It could be argued that nostalgia is a big part of it, but that doesn't account for the scores of people who didn't even play it when it was new. Either it wasn't on the radar, or they didn't have access to it, as in my case, or they weren't even born yet. People were born after the year 2000, I know, it's crazy. If you're one of those people, I implore you to have a go if you can. It's an important part of video gaming history, and in traditional Nintendo style, it's still a boatload of fun.